I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. I'm joined today by the MLA for Fundy-the Isles-Saint John West, Andrea Anderson-Mason. Thank you so much for being here today, Andrea.
Thank you for having me. You know, I come here all the time. I love this place.
I'd love to talk to you a little bit about, you did a Facebook post last week, and I do want to recommend anyone at home to follow you on Facebook because you're great at staying connected with the community. You were asking for feedback. The budget was about to be released, and you wanted to hear what the priorities were from people in your region. What did you hear back?
Yeah, well, I do that for a reason, because I feel that my job as MLA is not to inform. It's not to bring Fredericton's voice back to my region. It is to be the voice of my region in Fredericton. So I do try and tailor my Facebook to be a bit more interactive. Sometimes it gets a little wild and crazy, and sometimes I fight back. Sometimes people will say, "Ooh, Andrea took the gloves off today." But no, I do it intentionally to try and engage with people. What did I hear? I heard a lot of common themes. There are certainly concerns, needs for housing. That is very much top of the list. Of course, there's the needs. I tried to steer away from healthcare because we know that that's very much a provincial issue that we hear across the province. Recreation, things that we need to do for retention, do hear about childcare. It's all the things that I feel, and sometimes I reach out to ask people what do they think, to make sure that I'm not alone. And I think what I heard was a lot of affirmation that people have the same concerns that I do.
Mm-hmm. And housing, obviously, it's a huge obstacle around the world, but it seems like each community is addressing it differently. What do you think will be the most effective ways for government to support communities as we try to navigate this?
Yeah, I think people would say that they're not maybe seeing as much as they would like from the provincial government right now, and I agree. I think that we can do much better. But I am encouraged. We do have a minister that is responsible specifically for housing, Minister Jill Green, and she really is doing a great job. I'm totally impressed at how comfortable she is in this new portfolio that's never existed. And I can tell you that there is a plan to be able to bring forward, and I think it is due in June. And my position has been, and she agrees, that one size does not fit all. So what is going to be needed in Grand Manan is not necessarily what's going to work for St. George, which is not necessarily what's going to work for St. Andrews or St. Stephen, and it's definitely what's not going to work for Moncton. Mm-hmm. So the intent right now is to really dig in to what is needed, specifically in rural New Brunswick, because we do see upstarts in the urban areas. It's much easier, but we have the need in rural New Brunswick, and we need to pivot and focus and make sure we tailor it to the communities.
Mm-hmm. The budget also put $2.3 million aside for improvements to ferries. Now, I don't want to speculate on what that might be, but obviously in a part of the world where we have so many islands, can we expect maybe something to be for Southwest New Brunswick?
So maybe I get a little more excited than other people do over ferries, and actually when they announced that, when they were talking about it in question period last week, I have to admit, I was like, I was raising the roof. I was pretty excited because that's us, that's this area. And when the final announcement comes out, people might say, that's it? But it actually was a tremendous amount of work. I am impressed with the way the government is going right now with the attention that they're giving to ferries. So when I first came in, the ferry topic was always an issue of frustration. We have a new civil servant. His name's Paul McDonald. Shout out to Paul. He's so amazing. He's focused just on our ferry situation, and he is, if you ask anyone who deals with him directly, like our mayor and councils, they'll tell you that he's doing a great job, and we do have some good news. So you probably know that last year we extended the Deer Island the trips. We brought in on an earlier trip in the morning, and of course for Whitehead, that was a pretty big deal for me as well. We extended their service on Sundays, and you're going to see another little extension coming up for another special ferry, which I think will, it's a big deal. To me, it might only seem like a small thing. To residents, but it's a step in the right direction.
I was just on Grand Manan, so I will say I took the Grand Manan ferry, and every time I do, it feels like it's not just transportation to me, it's this tourism draw. And I went up, I know it was cold. It was still March, obviously, but I watched the sunset on the ferry back to the mainland, and it was such a beautiful experience that I think, yeah, it goes beyond just the visit or the locals.
It's aptly named the Nan Adventure, because don't you just feel like you're going on an adventure? But that's how it is for us, the mainlanders. It's completely different for the residents of the island. It is their lifeline. It is their connection to the mainland. So even though it's exciting and fun for us, it is such an essential service, and I'm glad that it's finally getting the attention that it deserves.
And since I was just on Grandma Nan, I'll keep it on that topic for the time being. I was speaking with Mayor Bonnie Morris about the air ambulance service, and since it was lost in December 2022, what are maybe the next steps from the province in terms of supporting a solution?
So there's been a great deal of work that has gone on behind the scenes, in that the department has pulled together all options because we need to make sure that we have a solution that works for the residents and that is going to be a secure, we can't be bouncing back and forth. We can't have interruption of service. Number one priority is the health and safety of the residents, and it is absolutely necessary that we have service on the island. I suspect that we're going to hear, I feel like I've been saying this for a few weeks now, but we're going to hear a resolution in the next couple of weeks. I understand that Cabinet has been presented with all the options. There's certainly been some questions that have come out of those discussions, and once everything is answered, we're going to see some solutions. But number one priority for me is that we need on-island service, and we need it now. We needed it 2 months ago. Yeah.
You will be joining us in studio for April 16th, another Grandma Nan issue, which is the restoration of Swallowtail Lighthouse.
Don't you love that place?
It's honestly one of my favorite locations in, I would say, all of Canada, to tell you the truth. I'd say New Brunswick, but to me it goes beyond that. We're excited to have you. I'm going to shout it out again. April 16th, 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. on CHCO. You'll be joining us here for the telethon.
You know I love a good telethon. I love a good telethon.
Got your feet wet at Santa's Helpers. You'll be back.
I'm ready.
How is the province working with the Lightkeepers Society and all the volunteers on Grandma Nan who are trying to get this effort to restore such an iconic landmark?
And it's not just the volunteers, it's the municipality as well. I've been over on several occasions to meet with them to talk about how to work with the province to kind of steer and direct. And you will see a provincial commitment. It's too early for me to announce right now, but I've heard some people say, well, where's the province and all this? We are there. It is an important icon in our province, and you will see a provincial commitment.
You are very much known for your follow-throughs, and I don't say that as a compliment, it's just true. I was following the Hillary Hooper inquest in Saint John. We were there it was 3 days. I was able to go for 2. Patty Borthwick was there. She was pleased with the results of the inquest, the jury's recommendations. Just a week later, I saw that you introduced an act to amend the Coroner's Act. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So it actually got introduced through Chris Austin, who's the Minister of Public Safety, because as you know, every department has certain legislative schemes that they're responsible for. So the Coroner's Act does fall under public safety. So he introduced it, and I would have liked to have seen it introduced earlier, but anyone who's worked in government knows that things certainly take time. It was an interesting amendment, and I like to give credit where credit's due. The idea originally started with a conversation that I had with David Kuhn. And he came to me and said, did you realize what is mandatory for an inquiry, an inquest in New Brunswick, and what's not? And I hadn't looked at the legislation. And so we chatted about it and what changes could be made. And I actually said to him, why don't you do this? And he said, you're government. And sometimes it's easier if government brings a bill in. But he said, if you bring it in, then I would, we would have the support of the Green Party, and I hope we still do. So I went out, we did the research, I did a cross Canada scan, and most jurisdictions do have it that if someone passes while they are in a healthcare facility under the Mental Health Act, that there is an automatic inquiry. And that was a gap in our legislation. So I brought it forward. Initially, I went to the Premier and asked him his thoughts and if it was something that I could run with personally. And he right away said had full support. And actually, I got to give a shout out to Minister Dorothy Shepherd as well. She was fully in support of it. How we ended up doing it was running through public safety because we've made some other tweaks to the Act. But really, the crux of the changes has to exactly do with this situation.
For those of us who don't know, how long does it take to go from being introduced to the likelihood of it being passed?
Well, royal assent won't happen until the House closes at the end of June. So I think my last sitting day is June the 17th, and that's when most of our legislation will receive royal assent. So that will be the final day. The key is to get it past second reading. So it's been through first reading, now it will go to second reading, and that's when the other groups, the other parties in the legislature can criticize what the government has introduced and ask for amendments. My hope is, because I have talked with many members in the Liberal Party, and of course with David Kuhn, who's the leader for the Green Party, my hope is that we'll have their support and that they won't delay the passing of this legislation.
Another follow-through of yours was with French immersion reform. You actually stood for many people in your riding who didn't want to see this happen. I did an interview recently with Chris Collins, who's from the Canadian Parents for French New Brunswick, and he wanted to give you credit for the work you did, and he said it takes a lot of guts to go against your government and stand for what people in your riding want to see happen. So can you tell us a little bit about how you advocated for people in your riding who said they didn't want to see French immersion reform happen?
So again, I've got to give credit where credit's due. I had a group of teachers who called me up and said, we just want to talk to you about what this means. And I went to visit them, and they explained to me about what the implications might mean for literacy in the province of New Brunswick. And I apologize because I could speak for hours on this topic. I am now a huge literacy advocate because I really wasn't aware of what the situation was. Are you aware that in the province of New Brunswick, almost half of our population is functionally illiterate? It's true. It's true and very accurate. And if you can't read, how much does that limit you? So what their concerns were from an educational perspective, in that if we changed how we taught French immersion to what was being proposed, that we would actually lose on the literacy arm of educating our students how to read. And we're already some of the lowest results in the country. And so, but here's the exciting thing, is that these educators are so passionate and so great, because they were seeing failures in literacy, they went out on their own a few years ago and took a new course, a new way of educating kids. I say new way, but it's actually an old way of how you and I learn to read. We learn to read with phonetics. I'm really oversimplifying it here. It's more than that. They went back and retrained, and they started teaching the kids in, I'm going to be transparent, in Blacks Harbour, this way to learn to read. And they saw tremendous results. And pretty soon the rest of the district was saying, what are you doing? And this fall will be the first time that the entire province follows exactly what those great teachers in Blacks Harbour did. And so if we were going to change and bring in the French immersion program, it was going to interrupt this switch, which when we look at the results of what's been happening in the South End schools in Saint John, where we've been following, because they've also brought this same method of teaching in, it's remarkable. So my hope is that we're going to continue down this path of prioritizing literacy in our province, and maybe at some point in time we can say we're leading the country instead of being last.
Wow.
But that's why the French immersion issue was such a huge thing for me, because I don't want it.
Were you surprised though to see the change of heart, and that this idea was really considered and weighted and ultimately listened to?
I think what surprised me is the lack of knowledge about literacy struggles in our province. And when I started going to my colleagues, and that's what I did, I went to them one-on-one and I started explaining to them in much greater detail what the implications would be. And there was not one MLA that I went to that after we were done talking didn't say, you know what, that's a big deal. We have to talk about that. So even though my voice might have been one of the only voices that you heard in dissent, there was a lot of concern when we started looking at the bigger picture of what this might mean.
Well, I think there was a lot of relief. Another big change that did happen this year was amalgamation. Are you hearing a lot from residents? I know obviously do you take this back to the province, what you're hearing in terms of woes with local governance reform and ultimately the hiccups that we're facing along the way as we navigate it?
I always take back what I hear, always. So I spent today's a Monday that we're doing this. I spent today in the office, and it was a full day of meetings, and at the end of every single meeting, I can honestly tell you that I looked at the constituents across the table from me and said, I'm taking that back. And it has been sort of quiet as far as the reconfigurations. I haven't heard a lot of negativity. The world didn't end. We didn't wake up on January 1st and everybody was lost in the province of New Brunswick because they couldn't, find St. George anymore. We've continued on. In fact, the taxation, we saw a decrease in taxation for most of Eastern Charlotte. I had the privilege this morning to meet with Mayor and CEO from Fundy Shores, and I'm telling you, they're on fire down there. I can't wait to see where they go. And to me, what that means is it was a step in the right direction because they are plotting the future. And that's what we need. We need civic leaders who are future oriented.
Now, we also saw the provincial boundary lines redrawn recently. Now, originally we thought, Campobello was going to go in Fundy-the Isles-Saint John West.
Campobello.
That's now back in St. Croix,
Yeah.
but your writing has still changed a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about where the changes will be seen most?
I lost a little bit of West St. John. So for those who didn't know, my writing went all the way up to Accomack-Morna Heights. So it went all the way up to Grand Bay Westfield, to the edge of Grand Bay Westfield. And everybody knows where the grocery store is, I guess, in Grand Bay. That's where my line was. So now it's a little bit lower. Now I just have from Lorneville over, Lorneville West, and I think the idea was to keep it very coastal.
As a journalist covering the same area, I know how challenging it can be, though, to get from I don't go to Graminan as much as I'd like, just because it's always a 2-day trip every time I go. So I definitely feel for the amount of area you have to cover. Not just the amount of area, but the ways to get there sometimes also make it more
And I don't know if you know this, but if I spent the night, I never got reimbursed for that. So all of those overnight trips were out of my pocket. Not that I mind, because a lot of people would say that we get paid way too much money anyhow, but it is a challenge. And I said to somebody recently, I was speaking at an event, and I said, I'm just never enough. I'm never on the mainland enough. I never make it to St. John enough. I'm never in Graminan enough. I'm never on Deer Island enough. I'm never in Whitehead enough. I do go to the grocery store in St. George a lot, or in Eastern Charlotte, so people see me there a lot. But it just feels like there's not enough of me to go around.
What do you find going into almost the second half of, I guess I'm really overthinking that, not the second half, I guess the second quarter of 2023. What are the challenges ahead for your writing, and are they vastly different from one place to the next?
I think one of the biggest challenges that I faced is I'm an upstream thinker. And we've all heard the river story, right? Where the gentleman comes into the community and there's a river going through the community, and he looks and there's people standing on both sides of the river, and they're pulling bodies from out of the river because they're coming down this massive waterfall, and everything's just in chaos as people are trying to save people. And he looks around, and then he takes to running upstream, and one of the villagers says, "Where are you going? We need help down here with the bodies that we're pulling out of the water." And he says, "I'm going upstream to find out why they're falling in." And I'm an upstream thinker. I'm always saying, okay, this is the crisis here, but why is it happening? And as a politician, and I think it's reflected even in this budget that we just brought out, it's not super sexy to be an upstream thinker, right? I heard Michael LeBron, he's the head of 12 Neighbors, the Fredericton group with the tiny homes to help work with homelessness. He said a little while ago, we are addicted to crisis response. And I think that's true. In many ways, we want to see our politicians, standing with the rubber boots filling sandbags. But you know what? Sometimes you got to go back and say, why are we flooding? And those are the type of issues that I like to try and deal with. And as a politician, that's not always popular. And so I think for me, that's kind of the struggle, is trying to say, yes, we can deal with the crisis here, but let's dig in deeper and find out why we're in the situation that we're in.
One of the solution-based groups in your writing that doesn't get enough credit. I know you give them a lot of credit, but ECW, we're talking indoor farming, so many different initiatives with car share, things that they're doing that I think should be a pilot project for the whole province, if not the whole country. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to have such an innovative and progressive group in your writing and some of the projects that they're working on that you're supporting?
I'm the luckiest woman in the world. I really am. We have just such an amazing group. I remember when they first were starting Project Village, and they told me that they were going to do that in Blacks Harbor, and I was, no offense, Blacks Harbor, I do love you, Blacks Harbor. I remember saying, Blacks Harbor, like, we could use it other places. And they said, look, if we can do it in Blacks Harbor, we can take it to the rest of the province. I just love how they think. They say this is bite size, and we can take it to the rest of the province. So I think you're going to see just that. All these wonderful projects that they've started with housing, with transportation, you're going to see it in the rest of the province. But the thing I really want to point out is how much value they bring to me. Because a lot of people look and say, this is the province's responsibility. And there's an element of truth to that. But really, the province's job is to support people like Eastern Charlotte Waterways. If people thought that I had all the answers, they completely voted for the wrong person, okay? I do not have all the answers, though some people might say I act like I do some days. But the greatest joy that I have is being able to get behind the people who do have the answers. And those people are scattered all across our riding. So that's why, like I said, on a day like today where I met with people all day, I'm just excited to go back to Fredericton and say, because I had some great solutions come my way today that I can't wait to take back to Fredericton, and hopefully we can make some change.
On that ECW topic, what are some of the projects that they're bringing forward that you're most excited about?
Where would I start? Where would I end with them? Right? I love their transportation strategy with their vehicles. One of the things that I had said was we need to set them up on Graham and Ann, because we have so many professionals that, you know how it is, you're racing to get to the ferry, right? You have to be in the lineup 45 minutes in advance on both ends. If we could have them ride share, right, then they wouldn't have the 45 minutes on the mainland trying to get there. They wouldn't have the 45 minutes cut short while they're trying to get in line. They're driving an energy efficient vehicle. It's a win-win situation, and God bless them, because they humor me and they're like, yeah, we can do that. Right? So they bring the good ideas, and we kind of work together. I love their housing projects. I love their indoor farm, right? I can't wait till we get that finalized and we can cut some ribbons down there. So
right, I will say this is my new tip for the ferry when you're leaving Graham and Ann is to park your car in line and then go eat at the sequel.
Yes.
I think anyone who does that route knows that pretty well.
Or at Christmas time, you go visit Angie Russell's place when she's all set up for Christmas, right? It's fabulous.
It's the secrets of the locals.
Yes.
But again, inflation is a huge, obviously, international issue. But are you feeling that closer to home and how it's affecting people's lives?
Yeah, so there's two different things that I want to say about that. So absolutely. The last 3 days, I've been to the grocery store 3 times. And each time my husband's come with me. Often he does not go with me to the grocery store anymore because he knows it's hard for me to make it in and out and not have 20 conversations. And I don't mind. I love that. And each time we went, we spent over $100. And my husband just keeps saying to me, Andrea, how are people going to feed themselves? And I don't have the answer. I'm shocked. I'm amazed at the cost of groceries. I am a huge advocate for preventative health care. And I am very fearful and concerned about the quality of food that people are going to have to purchase because that's all that they can afford, and the impact that's going to have on our healthcare system. So that's the first thing. I feel it firsthand. I don't have the answers, but we have to be providing more support for our seniors, for our most fragile of society, because I look at it like we're going to have to switch and turn it even over. Don't cringe, educators, when I say this, but I look at how European countries do it. with food security topics and how they deal with food in the education system. Like in most schools in European countries, there are hot meals, healthy hot meals that are fed to kids every day. And if we as a society could look at pivoting in that direction, then we could take the stress off our educators, because many of our educators are worried about their kids and whether or not their kids are hungry, and you can't learn if you're hungry. So I do think that there are solutions there that we really have to start getting creative on how we can support our society. But I think the other thing that I want to point to, because I said there were two things, is I do want to look at our budget. And there's a lot of criticism of our budget right now. And I go back to that upstream thinking. And I think that there was some upstream thinking in this budget. When you do look at the fact that we have paid down over $2 billion on our deficit since we've entered government. And I know some people are saying, stop paying down debt, pay attention to the bodies that are coming out on this end of the river, right? Because that's the crisis response. But we have to have that proper balance. I don't know if you know, but in 2018, our provincial deficit was $14 billion. And now we've got it down to, I believe it's under 12. I think we're in the 11s. And do you know what that did to our daily interest payments? We were paying every single day in the province of New Brunswick $1.86 million on interest. Because of the reduction on the deficit, we are now saving $250,000 a day just on interest. That's $250,000 a day that we can now invest other places. We can invest that in healthcare. We can invest that in housing. So there has to be a proper balance, right? We do have to pay attention to the bodies that we're taking out of the water. So I know that's a grim picture, but we also have to start looking upstream and saying, how can we prepare?
Well, that's a great way of putting it. I know the Fraser Institute, end of 2022, did rank New Brunswick the top province in terms of its handling of the budget. So I like to hear it in that perspective, though. It really makes it more real.
It's hard to appreciate, because when you prevent something from happening, you never really get the credit, right? When you say, I averted a crisis, people kind of look at you and go, yeah, right. But that's the direction that we're going in, is we are averting crisis. When I was growing up, all I ever heard about was the fact that we would never pay off the deficit. And you know what, federally, we're never going to pay off the deficit. But provincially, we are going to become more responsible. And I see us going, it's just as important as pulling out those who are lifting up the most fragile. We've also got to make sure that there's a future for them as well.
Well, thank you for this great talk today. I hope you come back again soon. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I always enjoy coming.
My guest today has been the MLA for Fundy-the Isles-Saint John West, Andrea Anderson-Mason. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.